Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, an exciting one. We did push this one day, hoping that maybe there would be an official announcement from the PWHL about Seattle expansion. Still sounds like, knock on wood, things will happen there, but no announcement today, which, given the date, probably a good idea.
Hey, guess what? You circumvented the deep dive curse by pushing it back a day. April Fools, no, you haven't. So we're still waiting on that announcement, but still plenty to talk about with the PWHL potentially coming to Seattle. I mean, we'll have a lot to say on that one, so it should still be fine. But yeah, happy April Fool's Day, everybody. I have been tricked so many times already. Yeah. I always scroll Twitter in the morning just looking for any kind of headlines or anything new that we could talk about to try and circumvent that deep dive curse. And Dylan, you know, there were several things that I was like, hey, Dylan, did you see this? Did you see this? Yes. Yeah, I don't know. Still got to adjust.
RJ is having a rough one on April Fool's Day here. That is for sure. But yes, definitely, it is not an April Fool's. We're talking PWHL. That's going to really be the bulk of this podcast. Really excited to get to all of that and go through everything there. Talk some Yanni Newman and kind of how he's doing and go over his situation. Philip Grubauer and how he's doing, RJ, because that one, I mean, that might need the biggest, like, this is not an April Fool's Day. Philip Grubauer is just back and he's playing well. We really got to do that. Of course, we've got some other news items to hit on first, RJ. But before we get to those, it's almost summertime, RJ. It's kind of like my favorite time of year, summertime, weather's nice. Folks going to the beach, having fun, doing good stuff like that. You know where I'm going here, RJ?
Where are you going, Dylan? Let's see. I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe mishaps can happen at the beach. The beach isn't always great.
Oh, that is a good idea, and maybe I'll work that in when I get to our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor. But no, RJ, I'm actually going to hijack this podcast here real quick because with summer approaching, it's my favorite time of year. Because at Bath & Body Works, we get all the summertime tropical candles, and that is what I am here for. And so, forget it. It was an April Fool's Day prank. We're not talking PWHL. We're not talking Philip Grubauer. We're not talking Yanni Newman. We're talking Bath & Body Works summer candle review, RJ. And for those watching on the video version of this pod, you've already seen the overlay I've built for this. You see RJ's stunned face. This is what we're doing.
Okay, you're seeing it at the same time as I am. This is amazing what you've done, Dylan. Okay, this is... My wife tries to listen to all the episodes that she can't. She's listening to the entirety of this one. This is made for her.
Yes. No, I'm super pumped about this. This is, my favorite thing. Anybody who knows me personally, right, doesn't know my online persona, but knows me personally knows that I love the 3-wick candles from Bath & Body Works. I'm big into that, and my favorite ones are all the tropical ones that come out this time of year. My absolute favorite, of course, being Pink Pineapple Sunrise, which I do have here in my hand. Have to talk about it because it is just fantastic. And what I think is interesting this year for the tropical candles, every year they change up what the design looks like. A couple years ago, they just had the standard Bath & Body Works 3-wick candle design. It was pretty boring, but it worked. Last year they went with more of a pop neon style aesthetic with things. I guess I should have had last year's candle here. I still have the case saved. This year more of like a Tommy Bahama vibe with all the tropical candles, going with the like kind of wicked basket look on the bottom third, kind of plain green lid there, but then just like a nice tropical jungle landscape kind of going around everything. This one tinted pink, of course, for the Pink Pineapple Sunrise, which smells as good as ever. By the way, everybody, I load up on the candles of it. Got the hand soap this year. In the past, I've gotten the body cream, which, by the way, if you want to actually have your body smell like a scent from Bath & Body Works, everybody should know this. You want the body cream. You don't want the fragrance thing. You don't want the body wash. The body cream by far and away lasts the longest on you, and it's just like a moisturizer, so you might as well take care of your skin and smell the way you want to smell the rest of the day. Are you sticking with me here, RJ?
I'm trying to keep up. This is all very important.
This is all very good stuff. And again, can't stress this enough. You should be watching this segment. If you're listening, you should go look it up on YouTube and watch this. But the big thing is, obviously, I was able to load up on my pink pineapple sunrise because I need it to last the whole year, of course. And it's only really sold in stores during the summertime. But this, I haven't seen this before. Sweet kiwi and star fruit. And it's a different vibe. Pink pineapple sunrise, very, very fruity, very much smells like a pineapple and those kind of like lighter sweet tones like that. This, more of a beachy vibe, kind of reminds me of relaxing. It's a lot more subtle, right? It's not going to punch you in the face the way the sweet pineapple scent is going to punch you from the pink pineapple sunrise. I wouldn't say it smells like starfruit or kiwi, but it does very much invoke the beach. It's kind of like a leveled up version of their driftwood candle, which is sold year round, as everybody knows, at Bath and Body Works. So I definitely recommend, if you want like more subtle beach tones, this is the one that I would go with, the sweet kiwi and starfruit there.
I think I'd probably go with that over the pink pineapple sunrise, just for me personally. Although all these seem so foreign to me because I love the baked goods scents. That's
Yeah.
always my favorite. And I know that's not this time of year. That's not what this is for. You know,
Mhm.
that's the fall and everything. That's more my
Yeah.
thing. Although I have been using a peach body wash from Bath and Body Works that I do like.
Okay, well there we go. See, you're in on
That's
this
my little
too,
bit of
actually.
input I can give. The summer scents, though, I've got no clue. This is all on you.
Yes, no. I love the baked stuff as well. You know that. I think especially if you're ever trying to mask a scent, everybody like okay, you burn something in the kitchen. It happens to the best of us, not me. I am the actual best, but it does happen from time to time to people in the kitchen. You have like a smell or trash can smelling a little funky. I'm telling you, a sugar cookie candle masks everything. It doesn't necessarily sound like it would smell the strongest, but they're actually pretty strong, and they do a really good job of just masking any sort of bad odor that you've got in the kitchen area. Just stick a sugar cookie candle in there, light it up, you're gonna be fine. I don't know
Yeah,
why that is, but it is true.
I agree with you. And you know what? If you want to know why Dylan doesn't burn anything in the kitchen, you could check out his April Fool's video from last
Yes.
year, where he talks about his scouting techniques, which really you'll get some interesting tips on how to cook chicken properly as
I
well.
think it might have been 2 years ago now.
Was that 2 years?
I think it was 2 years
I
ago
think
now.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good stuff there. But yeah, there we go. Podcast over. It's in the can, RJ. We can get out of here.
All right, let's go.
All right.
See you all tomorrow at the watch party.
Yeah, exactly. Really. All right, there we go. There is my it wasn't even like a real April Fool's thing. I just wanted to talk about the candles because I was excited after picking them up this weekend.
I was gonna say this holiday, April Fool's Day, is so much better suited for you than it is for me. You thrive in this. I am just struggling to keep up. It's never been April Fool's Day to me. It's always been my dad's birthday. By the way, happy birthday, Dad. I know
Definitely.
you're listening to this one. So yeah, I don't know. Good job, Dylan. I'm so glad I have you around for days like today.
Well, on April Fool's, RJ, you're either the duper or the dupee. And I think it's clear now which one of us is which.
Yep, I can't deny it.
And if you were, I don't know, duped, like through a contract or through some sort of scheme that left you injured, perhaps, RJ, maybe an accident at the beach that was somebody else's fault, you could contact Rico Tessendor. The law offices of Rico Tessendor at ricotessendor.com, where you could get one of those wonderful free consultations that we're always talking about, RJ. Or you could call Rico at 425-778-9800. And again, schedule one of those free consultations. He's won millions of dollars for his clients, to help thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. As a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. And I feel like now we got to ask what his favorite Bath and Body Works scent is too. I feel like moving forward, RJ, that should just be standard practice as we work in more sponsors, as wonderful sponsors come to us the way Rico did, wanting to be a part of the ECH family and everything. I feel like as part of we should create some sort of like Google Sheet form, and that should be one of the things, is you gotta answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It helps with the holiday gifts as well. And you know what? I mean, he can answer this for us because we know he listens to the podcast because he
That's
reached
true.
out to us because he enjoys the podcast, because he listens to it. I know you're listening right now, Rico. Send us an email. Tell us which scent is your favorite. We can tell everybody.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And of course, want to hear from everybody. But yes, one more shout out to Rico for sponsoring the pod. And definitely hope if any of you are ever in the situation where you do need his services, that you reach out and you contact Rico. He will definitely take care of you. Now, RJ, you had also mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we do have the watch party tomorrow. So we do want to quickly remind everybody about that. It's going to be at the Moss Bay Hall location for Queen Anne Beer Hall tomorrow night. It's a 7:30 game time start for the Kraken being up there in Vancouver. We'll be there early, of course, setting up and hanging out and enjoying Wing Wednesday, most importantly, RJ, more than anything. That's what we're there for. But if you wanna show up, we're gonna have the bingo cards for this one. We're really excited about that. We've got a couple special prizes coming in, including one that was very generously donated last night from an ECH community member that I think everybody is going to want once you're there. I'm going to be donating an extra Bowie bobblehead. So if you missed out on that earlier this season, that's going to be one of the prizes you can win through either bingo or the raffle. And then, of course, the big grand prize, RJ, being the Kraken tickets that we'll be raffling off during the second intermission.
Yeah, and that is 2 tickets to the April 12th game, Kraken versus St. Louis Blues, the second to last home game of the entire season. You can win tickets. It's also the next home game. You can win tickets to that one at the watch party, and it's going to be a great time. I mean, forget April Fool's Day, Dylan. Wing Wednesday is the real holiday in which you thrive.
Definitely. And hey, it comes 52 times a year. Let's go.
Gotta love that.
That's what it's all about. And then last announcement, and then I promise we're actually going to be starting the deep dive. And that is that next week's deep dive, we want to make a mailbag episode. So if you have any questions that you want to have us answer here on the deep dive next week, feel free to leave a comment on this episode over on YouTube, or you can reach out to us via the various social media platforms that we are on at Emerald City HKY on Twitter. And then is it full Emerald City Hockey on Instagram?
No, it's still Emerald City
HKY.
HKY on Instagram as
Keep
well.
it
It's all
consistent.
consistent, all the same everywhere.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So definitely want to, can't wait to see what everybody has. It's been a long time since we've done a mailbag episode, but they're always a lot of fun to do. And I know everybody appreciates getting those questions answered. So looking forward to that next week.
Yeah, definitely. Love the questions from all you guys. It's been a while, so let's hear what you got.
Yeah, you can also email us. You can go to our website and email us through there. So definitely.
Yeah. Or contact at emeraldcityhockey.com if you don't want to go through the website.
Yeah, there you go. So, we're trying here. All right, RJ, let's talk some Philip Grubauer, because he got the start last night against the Dallas Stars in that second. I keep wanting to say back-to-back against the Stars, but it sort of
it's not technically a back-to-back.
It's not really.
I've almost fallen in that trap several times. I know exactly what you mean. If you're following the team, you know exactly what it was. It was 2 home games, both in Seattle against the same opponent, 2 days apart, and both losses, unfortunately. But there are some bright sides from that, and Philip Grubauer is one of them.
Yeah, he was. He looked fantastic in that one. Of course, not able to pick up the win, but that is not on Philip Grubauer in this one at all. Since coming back up from Coachella Valley, RJ, he's strung together some pretty good starts here, and I know we've been talking about this. You've especially been kind of leading the push to maybe rest Joey down the stretch here. The more Philip Grubauer keeps coming out with these starts, RJ, I keep thinking, okay, he should be inspiring confidence in the coaching staff. You're officially eliminated from the playoffs. I guess we could add that to the docket of the deep dive, but it's a little depressing. But, it's official at this point. I keep waiting for the coaching staff to maybe work him in a little bit more consistently, because what he's been giving them in these kind of spot starts that they've been having him go in has looked really good.
Agreed. And it's been 4 good starts now in a row since coming back from Coachella Valley. Whatever he did down there, the experience, the reps that he got seems to be working. And personally, at this point, I don't know what more you need to see from him to at least feel confident giving him a few more games down the stretch in this situation. Maybe it's one thing if you're trying to make a playoff push, you can't afford to lose a single game, whatever. But you have to understand the situation the Kraken are in right now, where the wins and losses don't matter a whole lot. If he does have a bad game, it's not the end of the world. But he's shown you that he's playing really well. And I think what shows it the most is this last game against Dallas, where this is really the first of the 4 games that I felt like was against a very good team. Minnesota is pretty good, but Dallas, a legitimate Stanley Cup contender with a lot of guys who can put the puck in the net. And Philip Grubauer looked really solid in that one. I mean, especially in the final, 55 minutes or so. It was a weird game. All the goal scoring pretty much came early on in that one. But I think you could tell in the body language, in just the way that he's reacting when he makes a save, or even afterward too, the way he kind of flips the puck away. Or there was a moment where Thomas Harley got cross-checked in the face by Brandon Montour all the way over in the far corner. And I don't think the TV broadcast caught any of this, just because, of course, that's the part you want to focus on. But the puck rolled all the way back to the other end to Philip Grubauer, and he was just kind of messing around with you. He was shooting the puck at the corner, at the glass. He was trying to flip it up on his stick and just kind of having a good time in a very close game, right? That could be a stressful moment there. But he was just chilling. It seemed like he knows he's playing well, and he kind of has his swagger back, at least for the time being. So given that that's the case, give him some more starts down the stretch here. I don't think there's any team left on the schedule that you should be afraid of starting him against. And that Joey Daccord, I've been saying this for a couple months, so I won't really belabor the point again, because everybody knows where I stand on this. He needs some rest. He has played too much this season. He needs some rest down the stretch, and there are issues with injuries and whatnot that even if they don't show up right now, they can add up. It's wear and tear on a person's body. Like, the human body isn't meant to do what butterfly goalies do. And so any chance to give him rest down the stretch, I think, is a good idea. I would love to see Grubauer start, even half the games going forward. I think that'd be a good thing.
Yeah, I think, 7 games left on the schedule for the Kraken, 3 starts in there, I think is
I guess half is
number.
Exactly isn't possible.
Yeah. I mean, you could pull the goalie at the first TV timeout of the second period, RJ. That would be about half. It would be a choice, that's for sure. But yeah, it's just fantastic to see him playing this way again. So much of Philip Grubauer's goaltending style, we've talked about this in years past, is him really taking the perfect angles on shots. He's not necessarily the biggest guy, but his ability to always stay square to the puck, stay square to a shooter, all of those things has been really impressive. And also kind of the controlled depth that he plays in the crease. And I think that's the big thing that I'm noticing from him now is, yeah, the depth is varied based on the situation, as it's going to be for any goaltender at the National Hockey League level. But it doesn't feel like he's kind of swinging as wildly to the extremes as he was earlier this year, when maybe his confidence was a little bit more shaken. We saw some games where it felt like he was just sunken back into the net almost. He was playing so deep in his crease. And then other games where it felt like he was trying to work out of that. And so he was playing hyper aggressive, and he'd be up at the top of the crease. And then if anything happened and the puck goes laterally or it gets behind him, there was issues because he was too far out there. Feels like he's back to understanding where in his crease, given the overall situation, he kind of needs to be for his body type, his goaltending style, and all of that. And that, I think, has been the most impressive thing, is just to see how dialed in he is there, because that's something that we've talked about in years past, comparing him to other Kraken goaltenders, is that ability of him to kind of know that depth there. And it's just nice to see that kind of recalibrated for him compared to what it was at times earlier this season, when, like I said, it was a little bit more all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good observation. And that's really where Philip Grubauer thrives, is how quickly he can get from one depth in the net to another if he knows where he wants to go and can get to the proper area. He's never been a bigger goalie. He's always kind of had to rely on that quickness, and we're seeing it now, but going to the right spots. I mean, often with passes, say, from behind the net out to the slot in front, he'd either get out too far in front of it and pull himself out of position, or he would stay too deep in his crease, maybe a little bit worried about pulling himself out of position. But now he gets right up to the top of the crease really fast. And there were a couple of big saves he made against Dallas where you're just wondering, man, how did he get out there so fast to challenge that shot? So just really good to see that from him after, I know it's been another rough season for him. And on the flip side, I do just want to say, because I'm sure there are some people in the fan base that, we've heard from them plenty. And I understand where you're coming from too. They're like, well, it doesn't really matter at this point. Are you suggesting like not buying him out in the summer? Like, are you saying keep him, bring him back? No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying give him some more games down the stretch to give Joey a rest.
Yeah, definitely. And he's earned it too. And he, deserves the chance to also look good, because if they are / win, they buy him out this offseason, it's good for him to have that tape. He can go and then work on getting an opportunity somewhere else, which, I think we all want to see for him as well. So that's definitely where we're coming from. Now, we talked about maybe like 3 starts in these last 7 games, RJ. I've got the schedule pulled up here. Let's try to pick those starts here. I think that could be kind of interesting and fun here. There is one back-to-back, so we know that that's going to be one start for him down this stretch. But if you were picking kind of 3 starts, looking at the schedule left here, RJ, where would you kind of lean, or should we go game by game and say which goalie we would start?
Interesting. I mean, I guess we could do it either way. I kind of have 3 starts picked out for
I do
Grubauer
too.
for sure. That just seems obvious to me.
Yeah.
But we can discuss it here. I mean, should we? You want to start and see if we agree,
we'll
or
go.
should I start?
Yeah, let's
go game by
quickly
game?
go game by game. So there's tomorrow at Vancouver. I think Joey probably gets that one. Regional rival.
I think he probably gets that one. I would start Grubauer.
Really?
Because
Okay.
I think he's earned it with the Dallas game. Yeah, I think, give him 2 starts in a row. I think he's earned it.
Okay. I mean, I'm not opposed to that.
That's what I would do. I don't think he's going to start, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, Vancouver has the injuries and stuff that they have and everything, so I could see that being the scenario. My first start was actually going to be the next game for Philip Grubauer, which is the game in San Jose. And I see the face you're making, and we know how the Grubauer start in San Jose earlier this season went. It was kind of the beginning of his significant struggles and everything, but I think you give him that chance to kind of wrestle those demons.
I was there, Dylan. I was in the building. I cannot in good conscience suggest that he starts the game at San Jose. I am sorry. I can't do it.
All right. That's fair. That's fine. Then I would give him the Vancouver start if you're not going to put him in San Jose. But I think I would give him that opportunity personally. Then you have the back-to-backs. LA night 1, you're in Los Angeles, then flying to Utah the next day. This is April 7th and April 8th. Give him the Utah start, right?
Yes, agreed. Give him the Utah start.
Yeah.
I think he would benefit in that one. And
Joey plays fantastic in LA too, so it's a good venue for him. Yeah.
And Grubauer had the 4-2 win in Utah March 14th. So there you go.
Yep. Vegas on April 10th. I give that to Joey.
Yep, agreed.
Same.
Give that one to Joey.
April 12th, St. Louis Blues, second to last home game. This is the next home game that they have. I pick this as Grubauer's next start. I know St. Louis is insanely hot right now, and that they'll probably be coming in on like some insane like 15-game win streak, whatever. But I think that you make that Grubauer's last home start as a member of the Seattle Kraken, and you give him that opportunity, and it kind of, I just feel like that's the one to go for if you're going to pick one of the last 2 home games, that's the one.
That's exactly where I was going with it too. And I think you give Joey fan appreciation night and all that stuff, but give Grubauer
Saturday night start at home, give it to Gru. It's fun stuff there. And then the last game, fan appreciation night, April 15th against the Los Angeles Kings. I think, Joey as the guy for most of this season should be the guy in net for fan appreciation night.
Yep, agreed. And fan favorite, face of the franchise. You got to do it.
Yep, definitely. All right, so we're more or less in agreement then.
Yes. Aside from the San Jose thing. Mostly in agreement there.
All right.
And I wouldn't mind. I mean, like if Grubauer gives you, like, let's say, you did start him against Vancouver and he gives you another good start. I wouldn't mind picking out one more for him. I mean, heck, even if it is San Jose or Vegas or whatever, just if he keeps it rolling, why not? I'm really on the Joey Decord needs rest train here. So there's really, I don't know. I mean, Grubauer starting all 7, I think would be a mistake, but anything beyond that, I really wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. All right, Yanni Newman, RJ. So Yanni Newman has played now 10 NHL games, I believe it is, has looked pretty good throughout them. Scored, handful of goals, picked up some assists here and there. Has generally looked like he's getting more and more comfortable. The confidence maybe gone up and down a little bit, just as things go. To be expected for any young guy making his NHL debut and going through those growing pains. But I think that overall, what we've seen from Yanni Newman has been a very positive picture. And it seems like he exceeded expectations with the team. So we weren't really thinking he would stick around as long as he has. But because of the way he was playing RJ, and not just, being this focal piece on the power play and all the stuff that he can do there with his shot, but at 5-on-5 as well, getting more and more comfortable there, being a big piece of the cycle game that they play in the offensive zone and kind of how well he handles those situations, trying to, pick his head up more, be more creative in the offensive zone. I think that's been another big addition to this club, is they just don't have a lot of guys that are really instinctually head in that direction, but Yanni Newman might be one of them, and I think that that's been partly why he's been hanging around here. But these last two games against Dallas, you're really seeing those young rookie cracks start to show. And last night we got our first indication that the team is really picking up on those when he was demoted mid-game down to the fourth line, RJ. And so we were thinking, do we see maybe before this big road trip that the team's going on some sort of move with Yanni Newman? But it does appear as of today still on the roster and presumably would play tomorrow in Vancouver.
Yeah, and it's after 11 a.m. as we record this. So if he was to get sent down today, we probably would have heard about it by now. I mean, you never know, excuse me, what deep dive curse can pop up after
Yes.
this. But it appears that he's here to stay. And I think one of the biggest indicators of just how well he's done is that I don't think this was the plan. As you mentioned, I don't think the plan was for him to play more than 2 or 3 games, but he just hit his 10th game with the Kraken last night. And I do want to explain something real quick on the whole 10th game thing, because I know a lot of people were asking us about that and had very good questions about the ELC slide and things like that, because for a lot of young players, the 10th NHL game in a season is a big milestone because it signals burning a year of their entry-level contract. When you're 18 or 19, you're eligible for that contract to slide over. And so it has major salary cap ramifications. But that's not the case with Newman. And I just want to quickly explain that, because we did have a lot of fans asking about this with Newman playing the 10th game last night. So in Yanni Newman's case, it does not have any impact on his entry-level contract playing that 10th game. And the reason for that is he is not eligible for an entry-level contract slide. He is too old. Yanni Newman is 20 years old. A slide in the entry-level contract is for players who are 18 or 19 years old. And if they play less than 10 NHL games, so they can go up to that 9-game mark, their contract in some cases is eligible to basically slide forward a year, where that year does not count. And, it goes on to the next year essentially. So that year doesn't count on their entry level contract. But if you played that 10th game and a player was eligible for the slide, then you quote unquote burn that year. So that year counts on the entry level contract, but that does not apply to Yanni Newman. He is too old. He was eligible for an ELC slide last year because he was under 20. He was 19 years old, and it did slide. So it has slid over to this year. But this year, that contract year was going to be burned no matter how many NHL games he played. He could play 0, it would be burned. He could play 82, it would be burned. So that doesn't matter. But then also people asked us about rookie status as well. And that works for things like NHL awards. And rookie status is different than the entry-level contract slide. So it's just whether Yanni Newman is considered a rookie next season, and he will be. In short, he will be. And the reason for that is that a skater is considered a rookie if he hasn't played 25 or more games in any previous season, or 6 or more games in any 2 previous seasons. So this is Yanni Newman's first NHL season. So the 2 seasons thing is out the window. And he will not play 25 or more games this year. The Kraken do not have enough games left for him to get to 25 games. So he will remain a rookie next year, whatever happens the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, great explanations there. And yeah, I know we've gotten those questions quite a few times, various places, and it is good to know. So we see him move down the lineup in last night's game. RJ, I had wondered if we were going to see that in the previous game against Dallas, that first Dallas game, just because he had a couple rookie mistakes in the first period that led to some Dallas odd man rushes up the ice. I wondered if Dan would maybe, sit him for a shift or something like that, if his ice time would be affected at all. It wasn't, but I think then having a rough start to the next Dallas game as well led Dan to need to act a little. And look, bottom line is that's fine. That's normal. I think that's, something that almost is expected for young players coming in who maybe aren't going to be first overall picks, superstar level guys. When they're struggling, you give them a chance to work through it still, right? He was still going out there. He was still taking shifts, but let them know that, hey, you got to be a little bit, more responsible with the puck out there. You don't want bad habits to form. You don't want to, reward maybe sloppiness with the puck or situations that develop around that and have it become habitual for those young players. They need to know that there are consequences for playing a little loose sometimes, right? Or not being fully aware of the overall situation and having multiple odd man rushes go against your team in one period. And so I think that's all Dan Bylsma was doing there, and I think that he handled it very well. You give him a chance to work through it still by getting out there, but also you're kind of signaling for a little bit of a reset as well, just by taking an action along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's what you want to do for any player, right? It's just intuitive, and I think it's important to stress that that is normal for any young player, any player, excuse me, in general, for that to happen. I think also you need to look at it in the context of that Stars game where it's a close game. You're down 2-1 for most of the game. You need a goal to get back in things. You're putting on a good push. And given the lineup configuration that you had with Chandler Stevenson coming back, the shuffle in the lines, you did have Eli Tolvanen stuck on the fourth line, and he is your second leading goal scorer and someone you probably turn to if you're looking for a goal. And so you're probably looking for ways to move him up in the lineup. And that's an easy spot where you can just flip him and Newman. You move the rookie down to the fourth line and you move your second leading goal scorer up into the top six to try and give you that extra bit of offensive push. And so I think that was part of the reasoning for it as well.
Yes. And then just to note this, at the very end, goalie pulled situation, Kraken need a goal to tie the game. Yanni Newman was out there. And I think that also says something there. When Dan Bylsma needed to load up the ice with his best shooters, with the guys that he believes gives him the best chance of scoring, Yanni Newman was on the ice in that scenario. We know how much Dan, just adores the shot that Yanni Newman has and how highly he speaks of it. I think that, that is also significant and worth mentioning, is that even though he did get demoted to the fourth line in this one, when it was time to put all the chips on the table for Coach Dan Bylsma, Yanni Newman was out there, to help give the team a chance to tie it up.
And I really liked seeing that. I turned to you and said, "Hey, I love Newman out here with the goalie pulled. Just let the kid go." And in a situation like that, got absolutely no problem with it. And I mean, you look at the ice time in general, and I know ice time as a number doesn't tell the whole story, but still, he finished with a pretty good clip. I mean, 1350 at 5-on-5, which was higher than people like Capo Caco, Jaden Schwartz. Like that's some pretty decent ice time still. So it wasn't like he was playing true fourth line minutes either.
Exactly. So interesting one. I do wonder if he's going to stay up the rest of the season. I guess, at any point it can change, but I do wonder if he stays up for the rest of the Kraken's regular season, RJ. Do we think that means he wouldn't be a part of a Coachella Valley Firebirds playoff run? Just because, like, I don't know. I don't exactly know the timing of that, but I'm kind of curious. Do they reward him almost by like being able to start the offseason a little bit early? I got to imagine they'd want him to be a part of it though.
No, he would definitely be a part of the Firebirds playoff run. That's for sure in my mind, and there wouldn't be any conflict either. The regular season for the Firebirds goes till April 19th.
Okay.
The Kraken regular season ends April 15th. So even if he stays the whole rest of the regular season, I think he goes down for Coachella's last two games on the 18th and 19th, and then just rides with them for the playoff run. Those are valuable reps that you absolutely want him getting. I think it would be a waste to not have him as part of that playoff run.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess the only then question becomes how many regular season games do you want him to get with the Firebirds just to maybe become reacclimated to the lineup and the speed of the AHL game and all of that stuff down there? And if you want more than one or two games, do you send him down a little bit early? But at this point, I mean, it would be a shame not to have him for fan appreciation night.
Yeah, that would be fun having him there. And also, I mean, even if he's, if you just miss that one game, it's they have the Firebirds have 5 days off before those final two games. It's from the 13th to the 18th. So it really doesn't, you don't get a whole
Yeah,
lot of
doesn't
extra
make a lot
games
of
by sending
sense.
him down before then. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sounds good there. Appreciate you looking that up and filling us in there. Anything else on Yanni Newman before we move on to the big topic of the day?
I guess just one little tidbit. I know you were talking about kind of decisions with the puck and all that stuff. I want him to trust that shot a little bit more, and I know he's not afraid to rip it, but just do it a little sooner too, because
Hmm.
guys will get in the shooting lane a little faster at the NHL level, and I think that's just one thing I'd like to see him adjust to, and really trusting it too, because it's tough as a rookie that you want to pull up and make sure that you don't have any better options than to
Hmm.
shoot it, but sometimes you just got to let it go before guys can get in the lane.
Yeah, I'm generally in favor of guys not playing selfishly. However, big
In
exception
this
in
situation,
this
yes.
situation when you have a shot that good, right? When you are the guy that like kind of, you know, undisputably maybe has the best shot on the team, I don't mind if that guy plays a little selfishly. You don't want him to go all the way selfish, taking shots from like, the blue line or something. But I do in my mind, like it's okay if those guys kind of go for it. You have a special shot, you use the special shot. Like that's just the way it is in my mind.
Yep, agreed.
All right. So big topic of the day is PWHL Seattle expansion. And I mean, I don't even know kind of where to begin with this because it's just such a big thing. But in the last week or so, we're starting to hear rumblings that this was possible. And then now those rumblings of it's possible that the PWHL would be expanding and that they would look to the West Coast and that Seattle would be one of those places that they'd look to into everybody who is like an insider or has any knowledge of the situation sure seems to be acting like it's a done deal.
Yeah, and that came along very quickly. I mean, I want to shout out John Barr, Sound of Hockey, for his reporting on this.
Mhm.
He says he's put the likelihood at 75%. Said we could hear an announcement as early as Tuesday, but we know the Tuesday announcement, which is today, is not going to happen. But still sounds like everybody involved thinks this is going to happen, and it all feels so fast still, and
It
I
does.
wasn't expecting this. That's really my first reaction. Is just wow, that's quick.
Well, I'm right there with you because it just felt like it was like, oh, they might be looking at this to, oh, they're in a week from now they're just going to make an announcement. They're just going to pick some places, and it's like, wow, that seems extremely fast. But then RJ, as I was researching everything today to talk about this is a league that has always moved fast. I mean, this was a league that announced that it was made and 6 months later was playing games, right? Which felt extremely fast. We talked about it on the Red Glare as like, boy, I hope this isn't too fast. I hope things don't fall through the cracks here. And more, for the most part, they didn't. Maybe certain things, and the league has acknowledged this, things like merchandise and that kind of stuff kind of fell through the cracks. You didn't have branding for the teams right away because you were kind of, on an accelerated timeline. We'll call it. We won't call it rushing. We'll call it
Very diplomatic, very good
an
today, Dylan.
accelerated timeline. So in that sense, I guess I'm not that surprised that this league, while it's heading towards the end of season two, would just kind of come around on expansion and then just go ahead and figure it out, announce cities, probably announce branding, maybe around the championship of this season or maybe shortly after into the off season, and then just be ready to go with those two new cities to start season three, which is what they're talking about, expansion. And then like they will be part of the league next season. Again, it feels very fast compared to other sports leagues, but this is just kind of how the PWHL has always operated.
Yeah, and I think they've done well overall so far. It hasn't been perfect. You mentioned merchandise and some issues with that, but they're here, they're doing well, and this is very on brand for the PWHL to take these big, bold steps. And I really want it to work out for them, not just because Seattle's involved, but because I'm a big PWHL fan. I
Mm-hmm.
love watching the games. I love women's hockey, and I really want to see it succeed. I want this to be that final answer that we've been looking for as far as a top flight women's league.
Right, exactly. I'm right there with you on all of this. Now, when this was first announced and the idea of it being two teams on the West Coast, RJ, you know, initial thoughts for us, obviously excitement over Seattle being one of those places. I think Seattle makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, which we will talk about here in just a little bit. But one of the other things that we thought of was also like, okay, that's far away from everybody else, right? That there is a geographical component of this that that seems aggressive, just because it's a long flight, it's a lot of travel expense to be traveling kind of coast to coast the way that teams are going to have to if you expand with just two on the West Coast. You can't really build like its own conference and then maybe manage things that way, like I had suggested earlier this year. Um, I'm still a little concerned about that component of it, but digging deeper into like kind of the financial health and viability of the league, RJ, I am less concerned about it. Like I don't know that fans appreciate kind of how well the PWHL has actually been doing these last two seasons.
Yeah, and it surprised me looking into it. I mean, not shocked because I've seen the general success that they've had, but actually looking into the numbers, they're quite reassuring, especially on the attendance figures, and especially given that some of the buildings are very limited and smaller that they had to work with initially. Um, but they do seem in as good a position as you can ask to expand and to reach out into other markets. And I think, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we're going to kind of break this down because I've got a whole number of points, but I still am concerned about the geographical element just because it leaves a lot of logistical questions still to be answered. Not that they can't be answered, but I just have questions about, okay, what do road trips look like, both when teams are coming to Seattle and Vancouver, and then when Seattle and Vancouver are going elsewhere. Is it going to be like a 4 games against each type of series? I feel like it would have to be something long like that. You know, does when you go on, like, how long are you gone for a road trip and away from your fans? If you're taking the tour of all the Eastern teams, are you gone for half the season? If you're Seattle or Vancouver, obviously you'll have lots of games where they play each other. Here I just have lots of questions on it logistically. If we're getting into the concerns of the questions, those are the kind of questions I have. Not that they can't be worked out, but it's just a lot to still be answered.
Well, again, this is comes from that accelerated timeline that it feels like it's all operating on, which is there's that excitement mixed with all of the questions. And I know lots of people want to know things like the team name and all where they're going to play games and all of that kind of stuff. And we maybe have some answers on some of that, but I do think that these other questions are important. And I think that, it also, one of the questions I have is literally last off season, not even that, like a full 12 months ago, you had the PWHL saying that they weren't looking at expansion yet, right? Like they literally, where's the quote? Yeah, they had shut down the idea of expanding, quote, anytime soon. It's been less than 12 months since that was
Well,
said.
we're not expanding next week. Not
Yeah.
anytime soon.
So I kind of want to know what changed that
Yeah.
kind of triggered this idea of expanding, because for those who don't know, the PWHL is owned by the Walter Group. That they own it. They own all 6 franchises that currently exist within the PWHL. It's all owned by a singular entity. It's not like, say, the National Hockey League where each team has its own ownership group. This is all owned by one singular entity. And there's questions around, are these incoming teams going to be owned by the Walter Group as well, or is this the first opportunity for other groups? And there are other groups that have been interested, that have approached the PWHL about the ability to purchase teams, either existing franchises, one of the 6 existing franchises, or of the of expansion teams, and that's not really clear to me. Whether or not this would be owned by a different entity, or if this would just be the Walter Group adding 7th and 8th franchises to the PWHL. That's something that I kind of wanted an answer on, because one of the things that would make me think, wow, this is maybe happening fast and it would maybe be a red flag, was if this is coming from an outside ownership group. I would wonder about how much of this, the quickness of this, would be wanting that buy-in, wanting that money, that expansion fee, to maybe help in other areas for the league, if that's the scenario here. But we don't even know if that's the scenario. That's how, like, kind of weirdly secretive this whole thing has been, outside of the fact that, like, it's gonna happen.
Exactly. And that's, I think, one of the reasons we wanted to kind of push this back and maybe wait for an official announcement with some clarification on this stuff. And I'm sure this is not the last that we're going to talk about it on this podcast. So, we'll address that stuff as the information comes out in the coming weeks, months, whatever the timeline actually
3
ends up
days
being.
according to this time,
Yeah,
PWHL scheduling.
possibly 3 days. And if they certainly, if they have any kind of media events or whatever where you can ask questions in the Seattle area, we're going to try to go to that and
Yeah.
get credentialed as we can. um but yeah, it just does leaves a lot of questions and potential concerns with those questions. If you do have the Walter Group just owning the teams again, I wonder about. I just think there's certain elements of the local market, especially here in Seattle, that you just need to be aware of, and that you need to know when you're operating a team around here to kind of best cater to the fans and everything too. I've got like a whole list of questions on that as well, and like where do they play, which arenas, and then what's the plan for the fans to get there. If
Hmm.
transit isn't really readily available, all sorts of things like that. Just things that you're going to need to have a plan for, and it's a quick timeline. And I feel bad that we're kind of going over all the concerns right now. Like first, I mean,
Right.
I almost wanted to, like, I had just this thing I want to get out of the way about how great of a market this is. Although I feel like anyone listening to this probably knows that, but I feel like it's still worth talking about. Maybe your plan was to kind of get to it at the end there, all the
Yeah,
excitement stuff once we get the concerns out of the way.
it's been fluid at at this moment. I have paragraphs of stuff written here, and we're bouncing all over the place. So
Yeah, same, same.
that is part of it. I just kind of wanted to get like the financial side out of the way first, and
Okay, cool.
anything that kind of related to that, because I just felt like it's cleaner to have that all in one type
Gotcha.
package, and then out of the equation here. So yeah, just kind of going off of that stuff. I think those are going to be big questions for this. I think, yeah, where they're going to play, all of that stuff we can talk about when we get more into the actual Seattle-ness of the idea of expansion
Okay.
here. But from a league perspective, important to note, when this league started, Walter Group talked about how they had a 10-year plan. It was a 10-year business plan for everything. They knew that the team was not that the league was not going to be profitable for several years, which it has not been. Based on what we know, we do not have exact figures of revenue and costs and all of that stuff for the PWHL, but we do know from their board that they have not turned a profit, which is very normal in this circumstance. So like, I don't want that to sound like it's a bad thing or anything like that. This is that is just the way things go. The most kind of financial talk that we had was after the first season, in which the board came out and they discussed things such as they made more money than they were expecting to, which is obviously good, but they also had more expenses than they thought they would. But part of that was because they accelerated. PWHL's favorite word when it comes to timelines. They accelerated a lot of timelines for that were going to be costs year one. They kind of very quickly realized that one of the big important things for the PWHL to kind of be considered legitimate and also to be able to reach fans globally and start building that fan base, which was obviously going to be priority one for them, was broadcasting and making sure that they had a solid broadcasting product, which I think we can all agree they do. And so what they did was, apparently that was part of like the heavy investment into broadcasting was part of their year 4 plan, and they moved up all of that to year 1, like kind of last minute. And so like partly why their costs were so much greater year 1, they said, was because that they sunk all that broadcasting cost that they had kind of initially planned on being delayed into year 1. Insanely smart choice to do that, by the way, like absolutely necessary, because like I said, the broadcast being as professional and well done and well produced as it is, RJ, I feel like was just so important to making the product overall watchable, because you want things like adequate camera angles and replay angles so that you can talk about and break down the game, not just so that it feels like every other sports broadcast, but so that you can appreciate so much more of the on ice product, what these women are able to do out there on the ice. It's one thing to watch them from a standard static, broadcasting angle that we're all used to, and the camera goes back and forth as the puck does. When you really start appreciating how good athletes are at their job is when you start seeing slow-mo replays and you get those uptight, close camera angles and the down at the glass camera and all of that kind of stuff. And so them investing in those aspects of the broadcast year one, I think was super important to getting all of us to not only see it like it's every other one of every other sports leagues out there, but also just so that we can appreciate the actual product and the skill that these women have.
And I think especially in a sport like hockey, where
Mm-hmm.
you have the skill, the speed, everything, the chaos that you can show off from different angles, and a real modern connected broadcast, I think it was crucial. And also because you didn't have proper team branding at that point too.
Yes.
I think there's always going to be a skepticism with any new sports league at any level, at any, men's, women's, whatever, a new sports league starting up, about how seriously to take it. And I think you have to take yourself seriously and you have to put out a serious product. And I think, given that the branding wasn't fully ready yet, you better have good TV broadcasts where, yes, the teams are kind of generic PWHL, Minnesota versus Boston, whatever. You are seeing a professional looking broadcast. I think it kind of set the tone for everybody taking this league seriously, as they should.
Right. It helped legitimize what it was that they were doing. And, you could debate whether or not they needed stuff like that to be legitimate. But I think for casual sports fans, it is important in
Yeah.
getting them to buy into your league.
And just having something where you can turn on the game, like the YouTube thing
Yeah,
is
huge.
incredible, where it's just there on your YouTube list. If you're a hockey fan or whatever, it's in your recommended algorithm. You just, yeah, I'll throw this on. I'll put it in the background and you watch and you're hooked. I
Yep.
mean, I've watched so many PWHL games because I was at the TV. My wife and I were, just relaxing. We're like, oh, what do we put on? And then, oh, there's a PWHL game. Boom, it's on. And we just, at first it's background. And then by the end of it, we're just
Yeah.
glued in to see how it finishes.
Yeah, it can't stay background, right?
It
Like
can't.
that's the
It really
that's the
can't.
great thing. And again, I think that was a great move by them. But so that's just to kind of give like an idea of some of the things that the league has been operating under, and kind of how they've been working things. That's kind of like one of the big ones, because again, it is a private group, because it's all owned by one entity. We don't, there's not like shareholder meetings where we're going to really get things behind the scenes. So we do have stuff like that. We have some attendance numbers, and this is where things really started to flip for me, RJ, from being maybe concerned about a Seattle and Vancouver team coming into being like, oh, you know what, maybe this isn't, the finances and everything won't be as big a deal. And that was with the average numbers that the PWHL has been drawing in attendance. And I have numbers here from year one and then from so far this season, year two, on what these average game attendances are. In year one, from the PWHL, now this includes the larger arena games, any games that they played out of market, as well as the playoffs. So significant that some of those things are going to increase the number here. The average attendance year one was 5,688 people. And then this year, that has grown to 7,401. Again, that includes the larger venue games like the one in Seattle that obviously did very well and all of that kind of stuff. The game in Montreal, I think it was, that set the record, with over 21,000 people. So some of those numbers are skewed up, but some of those numbers are also skewed down, RJ, because teams like the New York team play in a very small venue that just doesn't accommodate a lot of people, and so it's kind of, any home games for the New York team are pulling that number down. So I don't know if it really evens out and averages out, but the bottom line is, when you're talking about 7,500 people on average, that's pretty healthy from a gate receipt standpoint. You should be able to have enough to cover some operating expenses there.
Yeah, you really should. And especially given some of the numbers, it's really hard to get a total picture because of how wildly it varies, especially with New York and the smaller building, kind of capping things there. And then, with some of the special events that they've had where it's kind of been a one-off in different cities, how repeatable is that? I mean, there's certainly questions to be had there, but the overall attendance numbers for any hockey league is going to be fairly gate driven as far
Hmm.
as revenue. And those are pretty healthy numbers, especially this early on. And you are, seeing growth in markets like Montreal as well. That's up big. Boston is up big from year one to year two. And it's honestly better than I would have expected looking at it and doing the research.
Yeah, it definitely was for me. Just to give some like comparison. Oh, you know what the big comparison is that I should look up right now? Because I had looked at some like other smaller like men's leagues in smaller sports. A Major League Rugby. This blows Major League Rugby out of the water, by the way. So like I was kind of looking because those leagues are a little easier to get a sense of like their financial situations and stuff, and
Mhm.
so I was trying to kind of gauge where the PWHL is, you know, comparatively financially on stuff like that. But the one that I want to look up right now is MLS attendance and what the average attendance is for an MLS game, because I think that could be
During the
interesting.
2024 regular
Yeah.
season, MLS had an average attendance of 23,234. Now they are playing in much bigger buildings and in
Yes.
proper stadiums,
Yes.
so you're going to have a lot more
No, I was expecting
possibility.
it. Yeah, no, I was expecting it to be smaller. I'm not trying to do this as like a direct, oh my gosh, you're not as big as the MLS. Like that isn't what I'm
Yeah.
going for here. But the fact that you're like a third of the way to that number is honestly really impressive when you're talking about us, you know, soccer being the most popular sport worldwide. That's the word. I want to say year wide. Most popular sport worldwide. It's grown significantly here just recently in the United States, and the MLS has grown because of that. We're starting to see more and more names come over. I mean, Lionel Messi comes over. That's obviously going to help kind of boost things there for MLS. I just think that it's one of those things where, you know, I'm going back and I'm looking at kind of like the historical numbers, and yeah, it's pretty a lot better now for MLS than it used to be. And so I think that kind of comparing it to maybe some of those earlier seasons would be kind of an interesting thing here. But I think that again, these numbers are really healthy. The growth there has been really healthy for the PWHL, and I think that expanding out here to Seattle, we can kind of transition over to that now, would be a very smart move for them, and it would be a very supportive market.
Yeah, and you look at the attendance, sorry, by teams and for the last couple seasons, and if you're trying to hit those attendance numbers that even some of the top teams have, like a Toronto now or Montreal, it seems quite realistic that you could hit those numbers in Seattle and Vancouver, especially with the turnout for the
Mhm.
PWHL for the Takeover Tour games, but also just with the arenas and the capacity that you have. I mean, you shouldn't be limited to an extremely small, like New York, 3,000 fan size building. You're going to have the potential there to have this be among some of your best attendance for both these teams.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to look up the WHL average attendance because then we can look at like you know, kind of comparing hockey to hockey. And I look at the Everett Silvertips this season on average are averaging 6,358 fans at a game. I got to imagine a PWHL team in Seattle could pull basically that.
Yeah, I don't see why not. And by the way, Angel Wins Arena, where they play, capacity of 8,149 for hockey games. So I think that's right there in that sweet spot where it's among the basically it's right around the average for the top teams in Montreal and Toronto. Now you wouldn't expect to maybe sell out that building every single time,
Mhm.
but you have the capacity to do it.
Right. And Everett, by the way, third in the WHL in attendance, by the way. So like that's a very healthy number for a WHL team to have. Portland comes in fourth at 5,073. Again, that's something that I think could be surpassed by a PWHL team. And then Seattle, the Thunderbirds, at 4,559 on average so far this season. Now, smaller capacity barn there, I believe, for the T-Birds, but that's something where again, it would not shock me at all if year one a PWHL team could pass that number.
Yeah, I could totally see that. By the way, Shower Center, where the T-Birds play, 5,887 capacity for hockey. So, pretty healthy numbers there for both Everett and Seattle. But I don't see why a PWHL team couldn't be around that.
Right. Again, so these kind of comparisons and stuff are the things that make me feel a lot better about the idea of expansion happening this quickly, expansion being just a handful of teams out here on the West Coast instead of a larger, full like another 6 teams kind of thing, and creating a Western Conference. These were all the things that, like, kind of when researching this, makes me feel like the league is a lot more stable. And maybe, this is on us for having kind of gone through this in the past with women's hockey and the different leagues that have tried to start up, and how all of the issues that they've run into. And maybe it's not fair to put all of those kinds of worries on the PWHL, but it's just because we have seen this so many times in the past and how it's all gone wrong, that I think we're kind of approaching this with a level of skepticism that maybe the league doesn't deserve, or certainly the league is putting up numbers that's making us feel like we don't have to look at all of this skeptically anymore.
Yeah, and it's still something I can't fully shake. I don't know about you, Dylan. I don't know. You could show me whatever numbers and I would always still just be skeptical and be worried. But it comes from a place of really wanting this to work out.
Right.
And just hoping that they're, moving aggressively, but still cautiously enough to do it right.
Yes, definitely. So Seattle, like, obviously branding would be its own thing. It doesn't sound like we really know anything on that front. I don't think that we will. Whatever it's going to be, it's probably going to be great. Do you want it to kind of mirror like Kraken stuff, or anything along that lines, or anything along those lines, RJ, either from a color scheme or a naming convention standpoint?
From a naming convention, no. I
I don't
really, I
either.
mean, I don't either. I want it to be its own thing. I
Me
want
too.
it to be distinct from the Kraken. And I know I was talking with my wife about this yesterday. She very strongly agrees. Well, actually, that's really kind of where I got that opinion from. Is she, she was talking about all the reasons that she wants it to be distinct in its own thing, and I definitely agree.
And all of the other PWHL teams have been that way too, and so there's no reason to change that. I think it'll be interesting to see if they incorporate the kind of traditional, either of these expansion teams. If the other one's going to be in Vancouver, either of those teams kind of incorporate the traditional Pacific Northwest sports color scheme, which of like the blue and green.
And that sort of thing I wouldn't mind, just because it's not necessarily a tie-in with the Kraken, but just
Right.
it's the city, and it's the city in which you operate, and that'd be fine with me.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of those two teams should probably end up with something like that.
Yeah, I guess you don't want them both having that too, so you'd have to coordinate.
Yes, yes. As for venue, because we talked about this earlier, obviously, ideal Climate Pledge Arena would be awesome. I don't know how feasible that would be as a regular thing. I think you could do a handful of games there, throughout a season. Maybe you can do more earlier in the year, but once Sonics come back, right, you're going to have Kraken, you're going to have Sonics, you're going to have all of the concerts and shows that are performed at Climate Pledge Arena. I just don't know how much scheduling availability Climate Pledge is going to have. And I also don't know how much the rent of the building is going to be. And this is kind of another thing that I found interesting while looking it up. And this is sort of secondhand information, but for the Coca-Cola Coliseum, where the Toronto Scepters play, RJ, it looks like it's $100,000 for them to have a game there, every game. And honestly, that seems not that bad for an 8,100 capacity arena to kind of rent it out for the night. But $100,000, and it does sound like that is the most expensive arena that a team in the PWHL has right now. But I got to imagine Climate Pledge probably costs a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I'd say probably a good deal more than that. Just being a much bigger arena, much newer and more modern arena. It's the kind of thing where you have to weigh the costs versus how much money you can get back. And if you are going to have games at Climate Pledge Arena, you have to be sure that you can bring in a lot of fans, because if you don't, that could potentially lose money for you. It's going to be very heavily gate receipt driven. And so you mentioned a handful of games at Climate Pledge. I think literally a handful might actually be a good idea. You got 15 home games on the PWHL schedule, maybe 10 in Everett, and then 5 at Climate Pledge, something like that, where I think 5 games, it's a limited enough size that I think you could probably get some good attendance for 5, but maybe I wouldn't want to go more than that.
Yeah, because you would have to make sure that you drew close to what the game this season Drew, I would assume, to make it
Yeah,
all
like around
kind of
the
make sense.
12,000 mark. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd probably have to be pushing 10,000 for it to make sense, because here's the other side of things. You can make up for it by charging more, but I don't want them to, right? Like the Kraken already, it costs too much to go to a game,
Yep.
right? And I don't want the PWHL team to kind of follow in that in those footsteps of, we play in this great state of the art building. It is a beautiful building, but with the newness, with all the great features it has, comes a certain level of operating cost, and you have to at some point pass that along to fans. And I, as much as I think that the games at CPA could draw larger crowds just because of all the wonderful public transit options, the more centralized location, all of those things, that just being closer to a larger population center than say Everett is, I I don't want it to become too expensive for families to be able to go, for people to be able to go, for couples to be able to go, all of those things. I especially with the Kraken in town costing what they're going to cost in a couple of years, what the Sonics are going to cost. I would love if this was, you're seeing professional sports, but you can actually afford to go to a hockey game. You know what I mean?
I think, yeah, I think it's a big opportunity for really hockey fans in Seattle. If you want to go to games regularly, it's very hard to go to Kraken games unless you have a lot of money. And this could be a chance for hockey fans to go to and see a team more regularly in Seattle. And, they might not even be necessarily big women's hockey fans from the start, but they just want to go see some hockey games. They go to the games, they get attached to the team, and they become Seattle, whatever the team name is called,
Yeah.
fans, right? And they become PWHL fans. And I could see this as a way of attracting a lot of new fans, but you have to make sure that it's affordable and accessible, especially early on. I know you need to get the gate receipts. I know you need to make money, but especially early on with the team. And I think this is something that the PWHL at large realizes,
Hmm.
is that growing the game has to be your first and foremost priority. As long as you can still operate, next priority has to be growing the game and doing everything you can to do that.
Right, and it does feel like they have been doing that, and I think that the right play. And like I said, if your 10-year business plan is to, maybe the first half of that you're not going to be turning a profit, and you've done the math, and you're going to be stable through all of that, I think that you're good with it. Because I do think that this has the opportunity to be a big thing here in Seattle. I mean, we read off those numbers for um, the WHL teams and what their attendance is, and this is where I also think playing a decent amount, more than a one or two games a year in Climate Pledge in Seattle is important, RJ, because as much as I want to think that a significant portion of people would find a way to say get up to Everett if that's where they end up playing, we're looking at these WHL numbers, and yeah, I mean, that's a very healthy number in the WHL. Whatever it's got, I do wonder. Let me go back last year, pre Landon DuPont, and see what that number
Oh
was,
yeah,
because that might, no, okay, it was still good, second in the league last year. So Everett just does have a good
they
stable
do have
amount
a
of
devoted fan
hockey
base. We know that.
fans. Yeah, so that is a good one. But if you want to have this be one of the top attended PWHL teams, uh, I think that those Climate Pledge games would be the way to do it. I don't know how many hockey fans really travel, or would be down to travel significantly, multiple times a year up to Everett.
Yeah, and that is a concern that I definitely have about this. If Everett is kind of the home base, and I think the reason we're defaulting that too is John Barr mentioned this as a possibility because both Angel the Winds Arena and Climate Pledge Arena are managed by Oakview Group, and so that could be a tie-in that just makes sense. But um,
And it's a larger
it's
capacity place than
and
say
it's larger
Showware.
capacity. That's true. So it just kind of makes sense in both directions there. But I do wonder about the travel up to Everett. I think my guess is that the bulk, not that there aren't potential PWHL fans in Everett, but I think the bulk of them are probably in the city of Seattle. That would be my guess, probably closer to downtown and that sort of thing. And it's a long drive. I mean, especially if you're going for a game, which, you'd be competing with rush hour and things like that, that could be a 45 to 50-minute drive up to Everett, depending on where you're starting. And so I think that could be a real impediment to people going up there to go see a game, and especially doing it regularly. If you have season tickets and you're thinking 10 games to 15 games up there. That's a lot of time just spent in the car driving, one way or the other. And you can't really easily get there public transit wise. You can go a little further north via the light rail, but you can't get all the way up to Everett yet. I know they're building that, but it's still going to be
Mhm.
a ways. So I do worry about that. We've seen that even with NHL teams where it's been a major problem for them getting people in seats just because of how far the arena is from where the bulk of the fans are. And so you would have that problem here if it is Everett.
Yeah, I do think that it's one of those things, and well, an hour in the car doesn't sound like much to those of us that grew up in Southern California. I do recognize that we are very much an outlier and an exception in that regard, as we're just experiencing even just with this watch party, right? The watch party tomorrow, just being in Kirkland, and people being like, "Yeah, I can't get there." Like,
Yeah, they
they
won't be able to
don't
get there in
yeah,
time
they
for the
don't
game
own,
and everything. Yeah.
yeah, they either don't have cars, or they rely on public transit, and it's not the kind of the same system to get out there, or whatever it is, and that's a lot closer than Everett is. And so I know that that's, some anecdotal evidence, but it is something. And so I do think that that is something kind of worth thinking about with all of this. That being said, it's also one of those things where, does it offset? PWHL games will be in Everett, yes, but they're going to be substantially, more affordable than a Kraken game is going to be. And Everett being more of like a suburb, more families are going to be out there. All of a sudden, that becomes an option that you can take your family to one of those games a lot easier than going into a Kraken game where you got to worry about buying 4 tickets. You got to worry about paying an insane amount of money for parking, which the biggest sneaky hidden cost of all with the Seattle Kraken, it feels like, is the parking. You got to worry about all the food and concession prices at Climate Pledge Arena. You're if you are out there in the suburbs, or even a Linwood or something like that, going to a PWHL game, you're not going to have to worry about like it being like, oh hey, we're just going to take all of the discretionary spending for like 2 months worth of paychecks and blow it on this one evening, the way that you would if you have a family of 4 or 5 going to a Kraken game.
Yeah, it's definitely a different equation. I will say for tips games, parking is still a little bit rough up there.
Yeah.
But that's all things that can be. It's definitely not as expensive or nearly as bad. I mean, the parking situation around Climate Pledge Arena is among the worst I've ever seen, just because it's
Yes.
really not made for that. But it would be an upgrade for sure.
Yeah. So I do think that there's stuff like that would do well. One thing that I want to kind of throw in here, and I know we're over on time and all of that, but I feel like
Mhm.
this has all been a good discussion, and I definitely want to hear everybody's thoughts on all of this stuff. But there was the tweet today. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. And it was the person kind of updating on there being no press conference today, but it was a tweet that they had sent out yesterday. This is what, Brockton Coog on Twitter. And it was, currently appears the PWHL will expand westward with Vancouver, and then it says Vancouver in Seattle. I'm assuming it's supposed to be like and Seattle, but then with Detroit also in contention as well.
Oh, huh.
And so again, because
As well as in a third team, or no, there'd be two teams and Detroit would be there instead of one of the teams.
that's what I'm wondering. And so now I don't know. I haven't been on Twitter
Three
really.
expansion teams is a lot,
That
especially if you're doing
becomes
the
a
West
lot.
Coast thing and Detroit.
And Detroit Midwest, although Detroit's not that far from like Toronto and stuff. So it would
I
it would
know,
still
I
be
know,
fairly
but
regional to the other ones. I don't know how reliable a source this is. I haven't been on Twitter. I don't, follow this kind of stuff that closely. Um, but I do wonder, because of how accelerated the nature of the PWHL is. They did have good attendance when they had their game in Detroit, like last month, I think it was, or maybe 2 months ago. I do wonder if there was like a third entity that came in kind of last minute and was making a push for Detroit, if they would just kind of shift focus like that and maybe decide to do one West Coast, one Detroit, or add on Detroit as a third expansion team, because of how quickly this league moves and the decision making that they do, and frankly because it's all consolidated into one ownership group, so you could make decisions last minute like that. It does add in a potential other wrinkle to this whole situation.
it does. Dylan, tell me how it makes sense though to just do like Detroit and one of Seattle or
So this is what
Vancouver?
the Discord has been talking about today on our
Okay.
Emerald City Hockey Discord channel, and that would be, what about RJ? We're talking about the idea of kind of a Seattle team sharing uh, between like Everett and Climate Pledge. What if it's a regional team and it's shared between Vancouver and Seattle?
Interesting.
So you'd
I had
you'd
not thought
play
about that.
right. So you'd play like 7 games in Vancouver, 8 games in Seattle. Now all of a sudden, it becomes feasible to maybe have all their Seattle home games be at Climate Pledge, and then you can have the other ones at Rogers or
Yeah, you go
something
like
like that in
7 and 8 or
Vancouver.
something.
Right. And so maybe that becomes something, and then that also you're kind of tapping two, you know, financially well-off markets compared to a lot of other places in North America, that then might help you offset the additional costs of being geographically so far out there. Now again, this
Yeah.
is very much, Discord wild speculation here, but I do think that that's an interesting concept. I don't know, would Seattle answer us Seattle fans, would you be down sharing a team with Vancouver, or in the hockey world would you be afraid that it would always be defaulted to Vancouver's team that Seattle sometimes gets to see? Because I could very
Yeah,
much see that being a worry and concern.
for sure. And I'm really curious what you all think. I mean, what the fans think about this, because I mean, I'm just wrapping my mind around this idea. I think it'd be very interesting. You'd have to get the branding right too, to make
Yes.
sure that it feels shared and not just
Mm-hmm.
one or the other. I mean, I think you'd have the team name. What would you call it? Not the name of the team, but like where it's from, right? Would you call it
Yeah.
just PNW team, or would you call it Cascadia something, or would you call it like what would you
I would
what
lean
would you do?
Cascadia. I think that that's just
Yeah.
fun. I think that it's different, and it's but it's still very much up here, and
Hmm.
it kind of fits in with things. But yeah, it's a very interesting concept that I think from a financial viability standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to kind of do things that way. But you're also limiting yourself to future expansion, right? Like 10-20 years from now, PWHL is doing great. You'd probably want to have a team in each of those locales, and you don't want to deal with, you know,
Ripping it apart
ripping it
and
apart and having it in
yeah.
one place, and now you have this fan base that's torn between a new organization and the one that they rooted for the last 15 years. So it would be an interesting decision to go in that direction. Again, there is nothing to say that that is what's happening other than potentially a typo in a tweet that was Vancouver in Seattle. um, but it is something that, the idea of it, given so many of our concerns for this have been financial, it is one where it feels like the financial question gets answered a lot easier if that's the case.
Yeah, I think it would answer that. I mean, my other concerns still with that, and I know we're over time here, but just I feel like for travel purposes and logistics, you kind of need two teams to go over and visit and play if it's just one team.
Hmm.
And you're having teams from Toronto, Detroit, Boston, whatever, come over. How often are you having to face just this one team to make it work logistically, or
Yeah.
vice versa? If they're going over,
Yeah.
if you have two teams you can play, you can at least split up the games that way. That's why ultimately it doesn't make sense to me, I think, to just have go one team on the West at a time.
Yeah, it becomes like sort of a nightmare for where players are going to live as well, where
Oh
where
yeah, if you're a
where
play,
you
where do you live?
where you
And across
operate
an
the
international border,
yeah, yeah, where you
which
operate a
normally
team
that's a
and
very
everything.
easy thing, but that's not as easy as it
Yeah.
used to be over the last year. So
Yeah, no, it would create its own set of problems and headaches, while it tried to address others. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, and just because it does feel like, as much as all of this feels like it's going to happen, and it's going to be happening here soon, and we'll have an announcement soon. um, it does feel like, just with the way the PWHL does things, everything's on the table.
totally. I nothing would surprise me at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I guess everything would surprise me, but then
Yes.
everything and nothing at the same time.
Exactly, exactly. Um, Anything else that you wanted to talk about with this? Again, I know we've gone over a decent amount here, but I think we really hit on everything that I had.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just want to close it out by saying, yes, geography presents some concerns. The arenas present some concerns, but Seattle is the perfect market for
It
something like
is.
this. Seattle loves women's sports. Seattle loves women's hockey. The fans here are absolutely ready for this, and they will support a team, no question. as long as you can figure out the logistical stuff, the fan base is absolutely there and ready for it. And that's what makes me most excited, is that the fans are here, they're ready, they're waiting. Just do it right, and you're going to have a great result.
Yeah, and hopefully only do it once. That would be
Yes.
nice. But yes, I think it's the perfect place. I mean, one thing we didn't even talk about, because I just saw it, is like how would an expansion, like would there be an expansion draft? So the team, like
Oh yeah, how would that even work?
most players in the league are just on 1 year contracts anyway. Do they just enter free agency and just sign players? Although, part of what makes the PWHL work and everything like that is, you do have a handful of star players signed to those longer term deals, the 3 year contracts. And I do think that it is important to have star players. I'm not worried about a talent dilution problem adding two teams to the PWHL as a whole, but you do want to make sure that every market has a marketable star player on it. And I do wonder how that would work with these expansion teams. And that is, again, another question that
There
I'm
are
sure will
so
be
many
answered.
more questions.
But
Yeah.
it feels so wild that we're even at this point, that it's so not how other leagues operate, right? Where all of those questions get answered far before is it actually going to happen gets answered. Where this is very much happening, reverse from that, which is, we know it's happening. We just have zero idea of what it's going to look like. It's just a unique situation there, but in a lot of ways, it does make it a lot more exciting.
Yeah, and it certainly makes it more fun for us covering this as a story. And I'm sure this is just the very beginning of talk on the deep dive about all of this stuff. And it's going to give us plenty of topics
Oh
into
yeah.
the future.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very excited to be talking about it in the future. Excited to hear what everybody has to say as they reach out to us. Excited to hear questions and questions related to this that you may have, that you want our opinions on for next week's deep dive, the mailbag episode. So you could reach out to us and ask those questions there. Excited to talk about this with people at the watch party tomorrow evening at the Moss Bay Hall location, for Queen Anne Beer Hall, up there for that Seattle Kraken at Vancouver Canucks game. Again, the two markets we're really talking about here. It'd be great to see the NHL action, maybe on a day in which we get an announcement about their PWHL teams. Who knows? It could happen tomorrow. But again, one more reminder that that's going to be tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. You can win a pair of Kraken tickets during our second intermission raffle. We'll have some other raffle prizes, Bowie bobblehead, gonna have bingo and all of that kind of good stuff. Can't wait to go through that with everybody. Of course, want to thank our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor, for sponsoring the podcast like he does each and every week. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. And then one last thing here, RJ, as I go back to this overlay, just want to mention for everybody, going back to the Bath and Body Works candles here for a second. By the way, with the 3-wick candles, if you're looking to get into this lifestyle because we've made it seem so cool and awesome, which it is, always wait for the sales. Do not pay full price for the 3-wick candles. Okay, just don't. Unless you need a last minute gift, something like that. Always wait for a sale. They do sales very regularly, either multi-buy sales or just sales. And then keep your eyes out. It's usually in like early December. They do the candle day online where the 3-wick candles get their biggest discount of the year. It's a big deal for those of us in the game. If you know, you know.
Yeah, that's a holiday for you. I know I can never get a hold of you that day of the year. I'll text you a bunch of times. Oh yeah, it's Candle Day. So there you go.
It feels a real shame that this overlay is useful for like just this.
I feel like you're going to try and make this a weekly segment.
I would love to make it a weekly segment and just start reviewing these. Maybe get Bath and Body Works on as a sponsor. I don't know. Get some free candles in here. I would definitely do that. But this is not bad for like 7 minutes of work. I feel like.
I really only 7 minutes of work this took you.
Talented guy. What can I say? All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. Hope to see you at the watch party tomorrow, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.